Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to Talking Up Africa. It's your live business show on African business affairs brought to you by Africa Scotland Business Network. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you into episode 5, The Future of Mining, an industry critical to Africa's economies and people. You'll be able to find a recording of this episode on our YouTube channel, where you'll also find an enormous amount of relevant business content. So please say hello to each other in the chat, introduce yourself, and get your questions ready for our esteemed panelists today, ladies and gentlemen. Comment and input in the chat as much as you like. This is also about what you have to say. So for those who are new to Talking Up Africa, or indeed Africa Scotland Business Network, I'm Claire. It's great to meet you all. And I'm one of the 3 directors here at ASBN. We're an international business network born and built from Africa, and one that is connected to the shared economies of Scotland and back, and increasingly with the world, as we are on our way to creating a truly global African-born business network. We are live from our head office here in Cape Town. I say head office, it's actually our only office, but we certainly dream big here at ASBN. And a massive thank you to our host and speaker today, Zenzo Nkomo. He's the CEO of the Faro, and he's no stranger to the mining industry. I just want to say a quick thank you to our fantastic panelists that need absolutely no introduction in the mining industry. But since most of them are ASBN members, I'm going to do a quick mention before I hand over to Zenzo. So thank you so much to Tara from Africa Risk Consulting, to Brandon from Dentons, and Kudzai from Howden, a chart industries company, for your contribution and input today. I also want to say a huge thank you and special welcome to Vestin. He's the CEO of the Namibian Chamber of Mines, who is joining us from gorgeous Windhoek. Welcome, Vestin. It's an absolute honour to have you in our panel today. So please stay connected with us. Tell us what you want to hear about in the next episodes. We will bring you the best in the industries. So follow ASBN on our channels. Please subscribe to our news. We are here to create real impact as a business network for Africa, in Africa, with a global outlook. So please enjoy the show, ladies and gentlemen. We have registrants here from all over Africa and other parts of the world. And I also want to say a quick hello to the African Minerals Fund, who are also joining us in the audience, and to our ASBN member companies and guests who are here today. Please help our audience feel super welcome. So stay connected, stay unified, and it's now over to Zenzo to lead this panel. Thanks so much, Zenzo.
Thank you, Claire. It's always a pleasure, and welcome to everybody from all over the world. At least I'm comfortable that the speakers, we're pretty much in the same time zone, so nobody had to wake up on any odd hours to sit on the table here today. And yeah, as Claire said, it's always a pleasure to get to speak to, specialists and people who have actually walked the walk and talked the talk over a good number of years. And interestingly, if you look at the panel, I've just realized that there's literally just over a century of collective experience, and no pun intended on your age, colleagues on the panel, but I think it just goes to show that when you talk, we'll have to listen because you've been there, done that, and I think it's very, very important on what we're about to talk about. And again, thanks to Africa Scotland Business Network for making this happen. I think it's something that is very important that we need to do regularly, and more so now because Africa is becoming also quite a go-to area in as far as mining is concerned in all respect. And who better than to talk to those that have been involved prior and current and hopefully in the future as well. So what we're going to be talking about today, and again, as Claire says, please make comments, engage, and let's to get insights on what's happening. And I can see from the audience, there is potential investors and already existing investors, people who are really, really interested in participating within the mining space in Africa as a whole. And I think the talking points that we're going to be going around is very much varied. We will be talking about the workforce of the future, safety and lack thereof within the mining sector. I think we've had quite some unfortunate incidences which happen anywhere else in the world. But I think last year within South Africa, for instance, there's been some incidences that also speak to that. And it's important that we talk around that as well. And diversity and inclusion within the mining sector as well, something that we can't run away from, that we must actually engage and get to find out exactly what does that mean, for an investor and for those that are, the recipients of the investment. Because I think when we talk of investment, sometimes we think it's just the financial contributor, and yet investment is also the community that's going to participate, and also perhaps the government, and any other key stakeholders in that. All of those are investors in a project, and within mining, I think it's about time now that we start recognizing that and talk around that and say, in what format should that be? And then also the role of beneficiation in the future of mining and what opportunities it should open up. And again, that we will be discussing around that, so that we also understand in this day and age when we're talking investment within a mining project, how should the economy within that location of a project participate in everything that's going on? And more importantly, how will technology increasingly change or advance the industry? And I think that is really the big game changer on why mining is going to be different from what we know it. It's the technology around it, which also comes with a lot of discourse, because you come in a labor-intensive environment that requires high labor employment, but you have to balance that off with technology coming in, and that means less people will be employed. So those are very important discussions that we want to speak around. And obviously, myself, coming from the ecosystem within mining, we also very much involved in looking at the convergence of the community, the government, as well as the financial investor in a project, in trying to make sure that there is a harmonious and a win-win relationship when it comes to projects, mining projects in any environment, in particular here in sub-Saharan Africa. So yeah, that is what we're going to be talking around. And I think the speakers have been introduced. And however, what I'd like to do is to start off with Brandon, so that he can talk around some of his thoughts. Brandon, I think, Brandon, in your environment, obviously, you been involved on the legal side of mergers and acquisitions. You, I think, have a pretty much a good idea over the decades of the past in trying to identify and understand how we have evolved and what has become the pitfalls and the obstacles when it comes to investment in mining in Africa, by and large. And perhaps you can even share globally, but yeah, looking at Africa by and large, because I think right now we've got a lot of big Titanic mining houses, which in some instances are having to close down, but yet we have an emergence of small-scale mining coming in, and in most cases, there's mergers and acquisitions that are happening. We've seen that in South Africa, where company names are changing and so on. So Brandon, perhaps you can also just talk us through, in your opinion, what are the 3 key issues you think anyone investing into mining operation in Africa should actually consider? And also, what jurisdictions are attracting investments and why? And I'm sorry, I'm going to give you all 3, and then we can talk to that. And then also, what does ESG in Africa look like? And obviously, ESG, for the audience, being the environmental, social, and governance. It's a buzzword now, so but I think we need to talk around it because it encompasses everything that we're referring to and talking to. So, Brandon, over to you, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Zenzo. Appreciate the introduction. It's great to be here. It's great to talk about these issues. They're close to my heart. Fortunately, for my, which is now becoming emphasized, I think, my lengthy career, half of it was in-house, and I was fortunate to work with major mining companies like Samancor and Anglo American, and I worked in Africa, London, and I spent some time in Latin America as well. And the benefit of that is that, a mine is a mine. The issues are the issues. There's always unique issues relating to where the mine is found, but mines tend to be built in 80% in economically deprived areas. And so the human equation of that, whether it's Africa or Latin America or wherever it may be, is often very similar. So to answer your question, the big 3 coming in is, and I don't think any of this is rocket science or particularly anyone who's listening would say, oh, wow, that's something I hadn't thought of. But first of all, when I'm guiding investors into a mining operation in Africa, counterintuitively, the first thing I look at is where you're going to structure, and I'm speaking specifically as a lawyer here, where you're going to structure your deal. Where is your holding company going to be? And that question is really important. And I have a favorite place, which is Mauritius, because of 2 reasons. One, your tax treaties, which Mauritius has spent 15 years negotiating excellent and fair bilateral tax treaties between itself and many African jurisdictions. And secondly, alongside that, investor protection instruments and treaties that have been negotiated between Mauritius and many African companies. So it offers that, as well as fantastic, very clean, very tax efficient environment, very generally business efficient environment in which to work. So that's the first question, or that's the first thing I say to people. Next, if we look to the jurisdiction, the questions are always, okay, you've identified an asset, you've identified either greenfields or prospecting rights you want to buy and convert it into mining rights. You've identified a mine that you'd like to buy and continue to mine it, whatever the case may be. What are the regs around that? What is the free carry of the state or local communities? What are they entitled to in terms of equity? What's your tax regime like? What's your royalty regime like in respect to the mineral that you're interested in? Let's look at your numbers and see what, and your shareholding and your equity, and see what that's going to do. And then third and most importantly, go and see the mine. Go and see where it is. Walk the ground. Understand the relationship with the community. Understand the relationship that mine has, or the previous operator has, with the regulators. Look for environmental liability. Look for basic housekeeping. What is it that you're actually buying? So I like to combine a high-end, think ahead, strategically place your investment through common sense vehicles with maximum of protection, and then drill down almost immediately into mine site. How are you moving your product? what is, very importantly, the relationship between the operation and the local community and the state and the regulator? What's your environmental, what are your environmental provisions looking like? And very, very ordinary, very call it legal issues, because all of that actually has a material impact on the success of the transaction and the success of the investment. Can you remind me for the second question, please, Senzo?
Yeah. It's but I think you've touched on it. The jurisdictions and attracting investment and why. I know you mentioned Mauritius. You mentioned three very important ones, and for a moment I think you forgot one about the white beach sands. You spoke of the friendly environment, and I think the second question was the issue of jurisdictions and are they attracting investment and why?
So in Africa, or in any jurisdiction, there are two things that attract investment. One is the quality of the ore body or the resource, the grade, however you determine it, the ease of extraction, how it moves from a resource to a reserve. The second is the regulatory environment that enables a successful investment. And right now, I think the jurisdiction that's ticking those boxes, both equally strongly, is Zambia. It's got a fantastic, resources for battery metals and rare earth minerals as well. So it's got lovely, strong copper reserves that have been around for a long time, but still much more to go. And it's got a lovely amount of nickel with that, and then of course some rare earth minerals as well. The second most important thing about it is Zambia is just, I think, adopted not a come and take what you want approach, which never works out in the long term, but an orderly, intelligent licensing, permitting, investment structure, so that everyone knows what the rules are abided by, and transactions happen quite quickly. That's another issue especially in South Africa. Regulatory approval takes a while, and sometimes I think states struggle with the idea of time value of money. So Zambia at the moment is really top of my list. Next to that is the DRC, and that shoots ahead rather more because of the quality of the reserves. The regulatory environment seems to be going quite well. I'm seeing
Okay. I think there's a break in transmission from Brandon there. Is it just my side?
I've also lost him.
All right, yeah, we've lost Brandon, but I think we'll see and wait until we get back to him. But in the meantime, can we also get, at least I encourage the audience to get their questions ready for Brandon while he's trying to get back on. And then we'll see we can talk around that, because I find it interesting. Is speaking specifically Zambia, the DRC as well. So it would be interesting to pick his brains on why in those particular areas, what makes them attractive, despite perception, perhaps. So I think if I may, let's move on, unless, I don't know, Claire, are there any questions from the audience?
Hi, Zenzo. We don't have any questions as of yet, but Brandon is right here.
Yeah. Okay, Brandon is frozen. Is he audible at least? Can he talk?
He should be audible in 5 seconds.
Okay. All right.
Yes, I'm
5,
back.
4, 3, 2, 1. There we
All
go.
I can assume is some rival of Zambia or the DRC really didn't like me highlighting it and had me thrown off the off this platform. So apologies for that.
I
So
was
yes,
about to say, yeah.
other
Please
other
continue.
yeah, other jurisdictions I love, Namibia and Botswana. Nigeria is coming online. They've discovered that they have more than oil and gas, and also Angola and Mozambique are coming, and Tanzania are coming along quite nicely. But from a kind of investor focus on key minerals and ease of doing business, Zambia wins the prize. DRC doesn't win the prize for ease of doing business, but it's increasingly possible to run a fantastic operation there. Yeah. So those are my key jurisdictions. Just to be clear, when I mention Mauritius, I mentioned that as a holdco structure. So you'd put your holdco in Mauritius, and then you'd invest from Mauritius, and that Mauritian entity would buy into the operation there. So I love mines. I think they're beautiful, but I don't think the people of Mauritius would necessarily want them in their premises. So that's the purpose to Mauritius and that thing.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think it's you're quite right. Obviously, Mauritius is more also to do with the tax benefits, which speaks to the issue of the business friendliness of a country or an economy in trying to do certain things. And I think in our discussions with some of the panels as well, when we look at the continent as a whole, I think it's also then important to discuss the ability to actually host certain functions, holding functions in one country and operations in another, and so on. So I think it's one ways of trying to mitigate the challenges on the ground, of which the continent, I think there's good examples where that has happened. And also then finally, Brendan, very quickly, when we're talking ESG in Africa, in your opinion, what does that look like?
So, I mean, ESG, as we raised, as everyone knows, it stands for environment, social, governance issues. And it scares the heck out of lawyers because lawyers like to talk about laws and what's written down and what you will do and what you won't do. And ESG is a bit more warm and fuzzy than that, in certain aspects. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is a governance issue. And in Africa, I think that you have to make governance your absolute priority. Not only because it's the right thing to do, but because if you don't, it will impair your investment in a significant way. And so here's one of the instances where behaving correctly, keeping with all the laws and of whatever nation, and especially in terms of the anti-bribery and corruption, and those sorts of, every nation has them. America, of course, makes it an international law applicable to all Americans, no matter where they stay, which I think is correct. And then various other nations have their own laws that are applicable to their citizens who might hold shares. So it goes up the chain. That to me is the big one from governance. Allied to that is very much your role with your community. I always say in Africa, if you don't have a strong relationship with your hosting community, you do not have a mine. And governance comes to that. Governance talks about your engagement with the community, that it's done in good faith, that you don't overpromise and underdeliver, and that there's a transparency and a trust between the host community and the mining operations. We're very fond of talking about a social license to operate, and I'm a believer in that. I've done a number of transactions recently where it's emerged that the mining right has been suspended because of community dissatisfaction with information, with all sorts of things. I know involvements with communities, especially, having worked in South Africa, is vexed. It is not easy. It is a lengthy, arduous, and unpleasant sometimes process, but it is one that must be taken very seriously. A decent asset, you're literally pouring, a couple of $1 billion into a hole, and you're hoping to make money out of it over the next 30 years. If you don't have a strong ongoing relationship of trust and respect between the community and the host community and the mining operation, you're wasting your money. So for me, very quickly, those are, and I know it's odd to hear a lawyer bang on about that, but it's simply because I've had to clean up afterwards too often, or see deals fail at the last moment too often. Good investors led astray with stories and how everything's peachy. Right until that point, they do the walk on the ground. Right up until the point they go to the mine site. Then they discover, oh, heck, it's not. The last thing I'll say, and I think I'm taking too much time, is that investors, while consultants have, and of course with the environment, the big one, it speaks for itself, and that's where the law is. Environment talks to having a social license to operate. It talks to how you use your groundwater. It talks to how you dispose of your byproduct. It talks about how much dust you might disturb and influence people. So there is the fact of keeping the law and sticking with the law, but there's also a broader social license to operate. So yeah, those are my, in very condensed. I can talk about investment into mining in Africa for ages, and but really, if I have to pluck the low-hanging fruit and mention the things that I really would like people to think about before they come into Africa, as I advise a lot of clients all the time who want to do it, these are the big ones that I would like to highlight. Thank you.
No, great stuff, and great input, and thank you very much, Brandon. I see there's a hand from Geoffrey. Claire, can we get Geoffrey to give his input, and it's a statement or question, I'm not too sure, for Brandon.
Hi, Geoffrey. It's Geoffrey from Howden, Kudzai's colleague. Geoffrey, I'm not sure if you are just saying hi or if you have a question for Brandon, but if not, we can move straight on. If you can only put it in the chat. If not, we'll just move on.
Hi, Brandon. Can you?
Thank you.
Yeah, please go ahead, Geoffrey.
Thank you, Zenzo, and thank you, Brandon, for such a very insightful presentation. I just want to ask one question regarding the license to operate. How often is it passed on to suppliers? And do we have to take a proactive approach to that? Or do we have to wait after submitting bids and hear what the inclusions are from those bids as suppliers?
I think in South Africa, it's very much passed on to you through the mining charter. So there, the social license to operate will be your empowerment status. And the push that the government, I think, correctly has on mining companies doing business and procuring goods and services from Black-owned and majority Black-held service providers. I think, to answer your question more broadly, one of the questions, if you're in a process, if it's a sophisticated bid where you called in to discuss your bid and there's a Q&A session, is to front load that, to front load what are our social obligations to you guys? What do you want to see? What's going to help you in your reporting? What is going to help you in the way we conduct ourselves on site, who we hire, who we subcontract to? Do you have a small business incubator that we could speak to and see if there are appropriate subcontractors who we could speak to? Just showing a willingness, and B, I think an insight into this issue will go a far way. Another thing, if it isn't a sophisticated tender process where you're just submitting documents, I would have something that talks about your social responsibility with concrete examples and offers, like who would you like us to partner with? Is there scope for this? Is there scope for that? And then finally, the social license to operate, the one thing we mustn't forget, and this is where, yes, technology might be reducing some headcount, but it's also been absolutely fantastic in the mining space, is technology related to safety. So, you know, a big thing and I know it's been drilled into everyone and it's a pain, but understanding, you know, site health and safety checks and tests and orientation when your guys get onto site, and understanding and telling them, yes, it is painful, and yes, it can be done in a way that can be very high-handed, but actually it's part of the core of this operations value chain that people behave in a safely way, and we really want you guys to take it seriously and pay attention and not goof around. And if that can be seen by contractors, by the staff, by site personnel, that safety is important to you, that's also, I think, something that's going to really stand you in good stead with bidders.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot, Geoffrey, for your question. And as you said, Brendan, often you're asked to come and clean up afterwards. And in some cases, it's when things have really hit the fan and it becomes a reactive. And yet these are things that should be done as part of the due diligence into going into an environment. Community and stakeholder engagements should be part and parcel of any you know, project when you're starting out. I mean, we see it more too often. We're pretty much involved in that. But again, Brendan, thank you so very much. The time is never enough, unfortunately. The good thing is you can always also chat on the chat boxes. And again, this is going to be a podcast that will be made available. And we appreciate your time, and thank you so very much. If we may move on as well, fortunately, we only have an hour, and that's the most difficult thing. We want to hear so much, but there's so little time. The next speaker that I'd like to introduce is Weston Malango, who is the CEO of the Namibian Chamber of Mines. And no, he's not just involved in the Chamber of Mines in Namibia. He's been around the block in sub-Saharan Africa on various projects, and Zambia as well. He's been involved. So yes, like I said, there's more than a century worth of expertise with this with the panel. And Weston is quite an equal contributor to that. And Weston, thank you so very much for joining us. And what I'd like to maybe get from you also, in line with what we already been talking about, is the significance of value chains in enhancing industry value. If you listen to Geoffrey's question around supplier, you know, the role that suppliers should participate and at what point that should be participating, I think that speaks exactly to the issue of identifying who what is the value chain, and in what manner of order should it be approached. But maybe you can talk us around that, and then maybe in doing so, just let us know as well how Namibia is ensuring emphasis on value chains and local content in exploring the mining, the exploding mining industry. So over to you, Weston, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Senzo, and hello there, viewers. I hope you can all get me loud and clear. Thanks for the questions, and it's a pleasure to have this discussion with everybody. I think really to your questions, when you talk of value chains, really, we are talking of how the industry, a mining industry, can integrate with other sectors of the economy. This speaks to value addition. This speaks to upstream as well as downstream. Upstream in the sense of the suppliers of goods and services you've alluded to. And when you talk of the supplier of goods and services, then we are talking of actually deepening that area. And when you talk of deepening, is would like to see, I mean, the mining industry consumes so much. That what is consumed in the industry, it's a pity when you've got big mining houses that come and settle in Africa, and then at the end of the day, then all the inputs that goes into that operation are actually sourced from abroad or from the home country of that particular mining house. So really, for Africa to benefit from the most, to get the most out of the mineral resource endowment, you've got to be talking of deepening that upstream value chains, and that is looking for local investment, for participation of the locals in getting as suppliers. But even then, it's not just about importing some items and then reselling to the mines at a markup, but ideally, we're talking of actually establishing industries that will manufacture input that goes into mining. Classic example I'll give you. If you are doing an operation, if you talk of, for instance, copper, and you're smelting copper, and it's a copper sulfate, sulfides, then you are talking of one of the byproducts being sulfur dioxide. Now, sulfur dioxide, emitting it into the air, you're polluting the air. It's not good for the environment, and it's not good for human beings. That is what a classic example. We've got a smelter here in Namibia, in Chumeb, which has been revamped over in the last 10 years. And we are able, bag houses, installed technology. We talked about technology introduced, which captures all the off gases, and that sulfur dioxide gas, then we produce sulfuric acid. In turn, that sulfuric acid is used in the further processing uranium and copper when it comes to leaching processes. So you're talking of you've got a byproduct, which is then again sold to the industry as input, and that speaks to import substitution, because you conserve foreign exchange. And then most important is that you've created another industry. That industry, when you create another industry, you are creating more jobs. You are enhancing and growing the economy. So growing the economy really is not just looking at mining itself. Mining, we are all set, but the issue becomes, what is it that we consume, and what is it that can be manufactured locally? And that is what I'm calling deepening of the value chains. And that's where individuals can actually participate. And then, of course, we maybe before I even go further, mind you, every job that we create, or that is created, okay, in the multiplier effect, every job introduces two revenue streams for government. And that is a pay-as-you-earn, and the other one is VAT. VAT is a consumption tax. Employees, all of us need to eat. You go to your local grocery shop, they'll charge you VAT on any food stuff or anything that you buy, and that VAT goes to government. You cannot claim that because you're not VAT registered. I mean, that's the whole concept of VAT. It's part of the revenue of government. So that's why it's important when we grow the economy and create more jobs, government stands to benefit. I've talked of upstream. Let's move on to the downstream. Downstream, that's a value addition. You've heard our governments, they have been, and it's a unanimous, it's a chorus that is sung across Africa. Our leaders, they want to see minerals value added. It's a fact. It is true. We as a private sector, and particularly at the Chamber of Mines of Namibia, we are aligned to that thinking, because when we are accused, when we follow if we conduct the model of pit to port, then we are exporting jobs elsewhere other than Africa. It's a fact. And it's high time we as a private sector have got to do something so that we are aligned with the objectives of our nations or jurisdictions in which we are operating. So really, value addition is something that we've got to see that minerals are produced for us as mining sector. I'll give you a classic example. If you talk of copper, we mine copper, we process copper, depending on whether it's an oxide or then you take a solvent extraction electrowinning process. If it is a sulfur, then you're gonna go, a flotation and all that, end up with a concentrate, which still gets to a smelt, and all that, you still come to a final copper a metal. Now, when you get, for instance, to copper cathode, then you're talking of LME grade, which is 99.999%, or special high grade zinc is 99.999% pure. At that point, when you talk of the value chain within mining ambit, you basically, the mining industry has done 100% of value addition to that. Beyond that, that product becomes a feedstock into another process. If in this case for copper, you go into fabrication, then you are producing copper wire, copper tubes. And even that, it goes then further to another industry, which is now you've got to manufacture the intermediaries. And that's a classic example is then you manufacture the electric motor, for instance. And then, of course, electric motors, then that is what goes now, all the renewables now with a global shift from fossil fuels to cleaner forms of energy. I'm afraid to state the fact is that global push to cleaner form of energy, which is welcome, but it's not going to happen without mining. Mining is key for us to attain that. It's very, very key. So really, that's why that value chain is talking about the whole upstream, downstream. Let me also emphasize here one thing, is that when you look at the value chains, is also another aspect of seeing the industry, mining being integrated with other sectors of the economy. If you talk of agricultural minerals, then you are talking of its mining, which ends up limestone or anything, which ends up into the agriculture. You want to see the linkages so that mining is not an island, it's not an enclave industry. It should be integrated with other sectors of the economy. And in any case, that is what the African mining vision is all about, because unfortunately, all the years, 1800, 1600, we've had a model of pit to port. And this is why there's got to be a shift so that we are talking of the industrialization happens in Africa, and we should be able to export the final product. If you talk of now the critical minerals, and in Namibia, lithium is high on the agenda. We are, we've got lots of resources that have been identified, and there are lots of projects that are running. When you talk of lithium, you are talking of ultimately producing an lithium-ion battery. What stops us as Africans having investment so that we can produce a lithium-ion battery in Africa? But obviously, when you talk of the industry itself, no mine is going to produce a lithium-ion battery, because at most they're going to mine, they're going to process that, produce a concentrate, and end up metallurgical process and end up in a lithium carbonate and ultimately a lithium hydroxide. That's about the end of within the ambit of mining. Then we need other investors with a different set of technologies and skills to be able to take up that lithium hydroxide or lithium carbonate as a feedstock to start manufacturing lithium-ion battery components. And ultimately, then you've got a lithium-ion battery itself. And I truly believe as Africa, and this is where we need to put heads together, we may not have a plant that produces lithium-ion batteries in every country in Africa, but certainly we can talk of regional facilities that are able to do that, synergies, and really nothing stops us from doing that, so that at the end of the day, we are not exporting jobs all over the world. Those jobs are created, maintained in Africa. That is the essence of these value chains. Quickly to how is Namibia? Namibia?
Yeah, very quickly on that one. I think you did give us some examples, but maybe in a sentence or two, if you can just tell us how Namibia is doing what you're doing. I'm afraid we're running out of time.
Thank you. Very quick one. It was 2 sentences. Look, our government last year in June issued a directive banning the export of raw materials, for critical minerals. And when you talk of raw materials, again, what's the definition of a raw material? It's that model I was talking about, pit to port. So you're talking of you mine ore, and that goes through to a ship. No, that's what government is saying. we should, we as the private sector should do value addition. Again, it's talking back to, the value chains, what I've explained. So our government has banned the export of raw minerals, particularly critical minerals. And guess what? The same week, we as the Chamber of Mines actually issued a statement in support of our government, because we are aligned to that. We are not here to mine and ship the material all the way to put in the material to the ship. We want also to create jobs and to be able to add value, and it's our pride when we see that happening. So that's what I would say very quickly.
No, thank you so very much, and I think it's critical. I mean, what you just said now speaks to the relevance of creating an ecosystem around mining and ensuring, I think, special economic zones are built, and creating subsidiaries supporting businesses to that mining value chain. As you're saying, mining is mining, but mining is supplying a whole variant of industries. So yeah. Again, the pity is our time, but I think it's impressive what you said you've done, and congratulations on the ban of natural resources to leave the country. I think that's a start and a step in the right direction. We just have to obviously ensure that then an industry is created of local suppliers, where obviously international partners participate in technology transfer and so on. But yes, the existence of local suppliers will avoid what Geoffrey was talking about, and ensure that the community also becomes an investor. And God forbid, when mines close down, you are not leaving people who are dependent, but rather you've actually empowered people to serve other industries as well downstream, and be able to co-locate and share resources regionally, as you said. So that's great. And then speaking around that, I think what you've just shared with us, Weston, obviously speaks to the inability to do proper risk analysis and proper risk consulting when you're starting a project. And Brendan spoke about it much earlier. So I'm actually excited to speak to Tara, because Tara, in particular with you're not just a risk consultant, you've been a journalist as well in your previous life, if I can call it that. So you've walked the streets, the jungles, and everything of within the mining environment. So you will understand the pitfalls of what the issues are from a community point of view, and also from a boardroom point of view and a legislative point of view. So maybe share with us, Tara, and maybe very quickly on your end, just let us know what the risks miners are facing with the geopolitical disorder, and also what can African governments do to best create a win-win environment? Because I think, yes, you've been doing this for over 30 years now.
30 years now.
So over to you, Tara.
Thank you very much, Senzo. And just to pick up exactly on that point from you, Weston, it's absolutely the direction of the future. I mean, we've seen how successful Botswana has been in actually insisting that beneficiation of diamonds should be done at home, and the industry has had to come to the party. It really is it's a very important step forward. There's another aspect of this, I think, which goes to commodities, and my background as a journalist was a commodities reporter covering everything from copper to cocoa in the early days. Was actually the trading. Trading is still a very is an old colonial concept. Trading for the London Metals Exchange trades most of Africa's minerals and metals and so on. So actually, local exchanges are just as vital, I think, to create in the stock market. So, South Africa's got a vibrant stock market. Namibia has one. Let's get trading minerals, metals and minerals locally. But to come to the risk picture, and this sort of taps into very much part of, and I would have to say that even though I totally support Weston's support of a ban, but one also does have to do this in consultation, because one of the key risks to businesses doing, particularly mining, which looks at sort of 15, 20-year cycles, to have a sort of very hard stop, such as a ban, an absolute ban on the export of minerals, is what I call often, can be seen as a sort of an atomic bomb to kill a fly in a way, and it is a bit too. It can be, rather bring people with you, as the Botswanan government did. We've seen in Tanzania how a very hard nationalistic approach to mining actually scuppered lots of mining deals, and saw an absolute dearth, a cease of investment in Tanzania for a period of nearly 10 years. So, affecting the economy, affecting its growth rates, and really leading into the pandemic was very bad for Tanzania. So while everybody, and I wholly agree, stop exporting jobs, but also it has to be done in consultation with the industry, and lead times have to be given to the industry. That long-term, if you're talking a 15-year investment program, you've got to take that into account. But very, very briefly, the sort of model that we at Africa Risk Consulting, we provide this sort of advice to a lot of the majors and also then junior mining companies that are vital in the ecosystem for developing exploration and so on, is very simple. You've got to know your environment. That means the political, economic, and social and security environment where you're operating. Get to know your counterparties. Who are your counterparties? Are they politically exposed, which means that raising capital is not possible? What is the history and the reputation of the counterparties? From whom are you buying your license if you're moving up the mining food chain? And then critically know your community. Everything now depends on communities, and communities are not necessarily already there. We always forget that the African continent is very vast, and mining sites might be very remote, but you will be sure that if you build a mining site, you will develop a community. So knowing your community is part of that risk management model that we actually try and engage our clients on. Yeah. But if Senzo, I maybe just move back for a few minutes and talk about what we see as that difficult geopolitical picture that.
Sure. We have 2 minutes for you, so go ahead. Yeah.
Only 2 minutes. I'll be very, very quick. Obviously green energy is the big input, and people have mentioned Zambia, which is my country of childhood. I grew up on the copper belt, so and I've seen the country through privatization, etc., etc. But the demand shift, which is very similar, I think, to that which we saw in the 1990s, which when I was a journalist, is very similar. But the really different demand shift, the demand picture is green energy, obviously, but also African continental free trade arrangement. We've got infrastructure projects that are occurring all over the continent. And actually, I do see that over the next 10 years, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is going to be the main driver for demand. So that fits very clearly with what Weston is saying, that it is a domestic local demand, domestic local production for supply to local infrastructure projects is where we are going and could be going and should be going. Yeah. But just to put into that picture very, very briefly, in the last minute that I've got, we are entering this demand cycle at a time of total global disorder. The post-pandemic has seen a convulsion that is bringing with it new threats. We're not entering a bipolar world as we thought, which would be America and China, but a multipolar world, which is really much more volatile and more dangerous. We've actually seen how the external interference that we've actually seen in the countries that I was going to talk about were sort of Mali, Niger, and the Sahelian belt, which are very important for uranium mining, for gold mining, for a whole host of other types of mines, manganese in Gabon, for example. critical to this have actually become sort of controlled by Russia to a large extent. And Russian military is there and actually creating a very unstable environment, supporting coups, ending the 30 years of democratic transition that we've seen. And obviously that has a major impact on the prospect for mining companies operating in that area. So, you know, absolutely critical. Another key factor is that this is only going to get more volatile. We have a new scramble for Africa that we're seeing, which is driven by this need for resources and the need to have access to strategic minerals from the, and you've seen, and I'll end on this, to just that when you're building your risk picture, you unfortunately now have to take external actors like Russia and the global challenge between those countries into account with your planning. I'll stop there.
Absolutely. No, I think as you were saying with what Weston was alluding to, and obviously localizing is very important. And I think the key message there is we should localize with a plan at hand. And that it's not just a speech rhetoric that obviously sounds good. And normally with our environments, it's when it's election season or, you know, year ends, people make statements and pledges, but that it should be followed through with a plan in order to carry that through. If we're localizing, then let's make sure there's a plan to do so. Which is great. And thank you so very much, Tara. And last but not least, and for a reason, Kudzai, you are with Howden and obviously a very serious player in this environment. And I think on your end, you are involved actually in the setup of the processing plants, you know, in actually the actual mining itself. And I think you are in a best position again within the continent to actually share very quickly on your end how technology can actually assist mines during the clean energy transition. But also, if you can also just hint very quickly on the occupational health and safety standards, which is becoming a very, very serious issue, particularly where, you know, it's very labor intensive. Again, when I started, I did mention about the unfortunate incidents that we've experienced in South Africa last year. So yeah, over to you, Kudzai, very quickly. Thanks.
Thanks, Zenzo, for the opportunity. That's a great question. Mine ventilation, as you know, is at the center of mine occupational health and safety. Without ventilation, there's no mining. And what we are seeing in Africa is that mining is being undertaken by mining majors. You know, these are multinational mining giants that are coming from the West. And as they come to mine in Africa, they are also bringing along some very stringent standards that have to be adhered to as far as occupational health and safety is concerned. And that also aligned to what many governments are also legislating. So just by way of background, mines are ventilated primarily for 4 reasons. 1, to supply oxygen underground. Secondly, to dilute noxious or flammable gases. Thirdly, control dust and airborne pollutants. And lastly, to manage temperatures underground. Now, in terms of technology, we offer VentSim engineering services, which utilize simulation softwares to devise ventilation strategies that are capable of supporting the mine over its life. Now, through VentSim, we can actually establish the equipment that is required to support ventilation strategy for any mine, whether that be ventilation fans or mine cooling equipment. Now, in terms of digital solutions, we have a VentSim control and uptime, which allow us and the customer to remotely view and control these ventilation devices to ensure optimal efficiency and performance, which are important for energy savings. Now, if you talk about reducing the carbon footprint, it means you also have to regulate the efficiency and the performance of your equipment. And we have over the years developed such technologies to partner with mines in order to meet some very, very stringent standards that are being imposed by governments. If you don't mind, because we are out of time, if I can also just talk to the adoption of clean energy. In mining is not an exception. As you know, mining is empowering economies in Africa. As part of responsible mining, we are seeing the adoption of clean energy in mining, and where it hasn't been adopted, there's certainly huge focus in that, and in some cases, it's actually becoming mandatory. We are seeing use of liquefied natural gas and hydrogen as sources of cleaner energy, than forms of fossil energy, which was alluded to earlier. Carbon capture, methane drainage are also receiving attention as processes of reducing carbon footprint. Now, Howden has developed ventilation on demand technology, which modulates ventilation equipment across a wider spectrum of duty points in order to provide the correct amount of ventilation required by operations. That in turn reduces the mine's carbon footprint. Now, you recall that in the recent past, many mines were just blasting air underground, even to parts of the mine that were not being mined. But smart mining today entails actually regulating where you send air for ventilation, where there's no mining activity. You can actually divert air from those parts of the mines to where air is required through this modulation system that I'm talking about. What that does is it saves you energy, and it also saves you a lot of money, because you are deploying air where it's required, not everywhere. And that's smart technology that we've developed over the years. We've been in Africa for well over 8 years and globally for well over 160 years. So we are talking about many decades of expertise in developing mining technology. So,
No, absolutely. I feel so bad because there's just so much to engage. Perhaps we'll speak to Claire and have a part 2 of something of this nature, because I think it's very, very important detail that we're talking about. And thank you very much to everybody that's been on the panel. But I think it's clear, just in summary, that obviously Africa is a new era for mining. It's a go-to environment. I mean, as you know, we've got now in sub-Saharan Africa, there's oil and gas discovered both offshore and on land as well. And now mining is no longer just the PGM type of activities. It's not only known for gold and platinum, but now it's actually an energy input resource, which is where the whole of the rest of the world is going to be dependent on that. And how that is handled will determine on how viable it's going to be for the continent and the people invested on the continent, whether financially, socially, or otherwise. It's also safe to assume and conclude that the future of mining is also based on the technology and the ability to be cohesive and engage with every investors proactively and not reactively. And I think if we move in that direction, based on the comments that have just been shared with us today, we should see a better life for anyone investing in Africa and anyone delivering services from within those environments as well. So I think on my end, colleagues, Kane, it's never enough time. And Claire, thank you so very much. I think, I'll safely hand over to you, Claire, and thank you again, colleagues, for sharing your insights. Much appreciated.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thanks so much, Senzo. Just to round up the panel, And again, a massive thank you to Zenzo and our esteemed panelists today, Tara from Africa Risk Consulting, Vestin from Namibia, the CEO of the Namibian Chamber of Mines, Kudzai from Howden, Brandon from Dentons, and Jeffrey, it's good to see you on camera as well from Howden, a great ASBN member. Thank you to everyone who took part live in the audience. Stay connected with us. It's africascotland.network. You can follow us on social media, Africa_Scotland. We do have a question for Vestin. It's from the African Mineral Fund, actually. Vestin, I'm going to connect you both on email if that's okay with you. That's what we do best at ASBN. So thank you so much. Stay connected and stay safe, and we will chat to you all soon. Good day.
Thank you. Till the next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.